So, failure is the only certainty besides death. We as people try to be perfectionists, and we try avoiding it. But life's unreachable rules have made failure and mistakes part of what makes us human. Today, I've brought with me the stories of some of the most incredible people this world has to offer in order to show you how failure impacted their lives. Starting with the fear. According to the Cleveland Clinic, fear of failure can bring out the worst in us, such as psychological problems, depression, anxiety, and some of the worst challenges that can tear someone down. But I beg to differ. Although it's true, we'll never be perfect, and no matter how talented we are, we will never escape from failure, our fear of failure is a survival mechanism that in some cases brings out the best in each and every single one of us. That is, if we can overcome and flourish into something good. Take the story of Dr. Ilyas Idderhem, the current executive director and founder of Transformative Peace. Of course, besides her humanitarian work, is the story of how she, an Arab Muslim woman, lived through college in the United States during the 9/11 tragedy. Imagine being one of 10 Muslim students in Iowa during a time where Muslims and Arabs were seen as barbaric, terrorists, and extremists to the entirety of the Western world. Imagine going through your mail and receiving hate comments and letters simply because some extremists across the world chose to use your religious beliefs in order to justify one of the greatest atrocities in history. The fear that you would feel when you are rejected and when you fail to be a part of society. But even then, she never let her fear consume her. In fact, that fear of failing turned into something great. She actively confronted racist stereotypes and proudly reclaimed her identity. She also co-founded Muslim organizations and associations to build bridges and understanding across ideological divides, and she changed her major from psychology to political communication. And through that, she overcame that fear of failure and became the great woman she is because of it. Similarly, Mr. Alba, our AP psychology teacher at AST, overcame a different type of fear. When he was our age, he underwent something that 90% of teenagers undergo. Ironically, it was a presentation for psychology class, and he wasn't really good at public speaking. And while he was giving that presentation, he made up a completely fictitious story about the psychological principle of cognition, recognition, and a banana. Now, of course, his classmates laughed, which for many high schoolers is the definition of embarrassment. But ever since then, that fear of reliving such a moment changed his approach to his work and to speaking in front of an audience completely. That fear of failure drove him to work harder, to prepare for all eventualities. And even more importantly, it forced him to be more confident. It pushed him to excel and even led to him winning an award for writing the best capstone paper at his university. It even pushed him to come back to AST and teach the very same subject that he once feared to fail. And today, I would even say that Mr. Omar is by far one of the best teachers that I've ever had the pleasure and honor to learn from. Therefore, proving that our innate fear of failing can be a curse and a blessing that depends entirely on how we overcome it and how we use it. Which brings us to the next ideology associated with failure, embracing failure. Confucius once said, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." But I believe that the man who moves a mountain begins by failing to move its boulders, and so eventually he gets strong enough to move them. Never has there been one person in history to succeed or to create or innovate on their first try. The Dyson vacuum had 5,127 failed prototypes before it became the vacuum that now everyone in the world uses. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, created 30 to 50 prototypes for the iPod and Macintosh before Apple finally released them. Learning from failure is how we grow. It's how we learn to be greater and better. It's how we become as close as possible to perfection. In fact, failure is how Mr. Khadrush ultimately succeeded in the field of software management for international airlines during the dot-com boom in the early 2000s. Originally pursuing his studies in the Netherlands, the internet tech company, and during the early stages of the internet revolution, Eventually, he received a job offer from that very same company to join its leadership team and develop an e-commerce platform. Now the goal was to create an online shopping hub, similar to multi-billion-dollar giants Amazon and eBay. Investments poured in from around the world due to the dot-com boom, as everyone wanted a stake in the growing tech industry. However, in 2011, with the collapse of the dot-com bubble, the stock market plummeted. Investors quickly withdrew their funds, and the project eventually died, leading to the company's bankruptcy. Now, despite these challenges, Mr. Qadouche was determined to overcome the financial obstacles he faced. He continued to develop the software and lead the management team, even spending an entire year of his life earning nothing and having no salary. In fact, when the company could not pay for rent anymore and they were kicked out, he had to move the servers from the offices to his home, even replacing his bed. Soon after, though, he was hired by an international airline company, simply because he knew more about the e-commerce market than the vice president of that company. Today, the software that he helped generate, develops for ticket purchasing, earns billions and billions of dollars for that international airline company. And that leads me to my final points, and the reason for why I'm standing in front of all of you today. Before we started the Future Doctors of Morocco, the Moroccan humanitarian and high school programs, all we were trying to do was create a club for the sake of getting accepted into a good college. At first, we tried NHS, but because of administrative issues, we failed. Then, we tried starting an Amnesty International club, but that proposal never even got to our principal. In fact, we had written, revised, and created about 126 different club proposals before eventually we ran out of ideas. It wasn't until April last year that I eventually came up with an idea that was different compared to the rest. What if we created something of our own? At the time, we were so focused on trying to get an international club or a program that was recognized by colleges that we never thought about creating something that was truly ours, that was truly Moroccan. In Morocco, in international schools, French, American, and all, there are dozens of humanities clubs, like Leo Club, key clubs. But no one thought of making a nationwide program that would be 100% Moroccan and led by high school students. Because when we was proposal 127, unfortunately, we failed again. Our motivations, though, they had changed. We no longer wanted to empower the youth of our country. We no longer wanted to show off to colleges. Instead, we wanted to show and empower the youth of our country. And so through using the network we had already established with schools all over Morocco, we started the first 2 nationwide high school programs dedicated to humanitarian aid. Today, hundreds, if not thousands, of orphans have had their lives changed and improved because of those 127 rejected proposals. Towns such as Sufra and communes have had their communities strengthened because of the help that we provided through our humanitarian projects. Even nursery homes in Casablanca have had their resources renewed. And with the help of the communities at ASM and AST, we got her the help she needed, so that she could get the curative surgery, and so that her son would not have to live without a mother. Failure moves our world in ways that we cannot predict. If we choose to try any endeavor, you must first be willing to fail. As Denzel Washington once said, if you're not failing, then you're not even trying. Or even better, as my own father always tells me, the greatest sailors aren't those who control the wind. No one can. The greatest sailors are those who navigate using the currents in order to get from point A to point B. Which otherwise means, in other words, the people who reach greatness and success in life don't do so by planning every single minute and detail of everything they do. They succeed by adapting and embracing the circumstances, and more than anything, embracing and learning from failure. Thank you very much.